From Netter to God, Cosmological Replacement, The Politics of Renaming the Divine, by Rue. Let's begin at the root. Etymology is the study of where words come from, their linguistic ancestry, their original meaning, how they evolved over time, and how power shaped that evolution. It is not random trivia. It is the archaeology of thought. When you study etymology, you are not just studying sound, you are studying agreements, because every word carries an agreement inside it, an assumption, a cosmology, a hierarchy, a way of organizing reality. When you inherit a word, you often inherit the worldview embedded within it. And when entire civilizations have their original vocabulary replaced, that replacement is not neutral. It is structural. Now take the word God. Its English form comes from Old English God, from Proto-Germanic Guten. It is tied to Germanic tribal cosmology and later absorbed into Christian theology. It implies a singular, supreme, external authority, a being above, separate, ruling. It carries vertical hierarchy. It assumes command and obedience. It fits feudal Europe well. Lord comes from Old English hlofwerd, literally loaf guardian, one who guards bread, a title of feudal land control. It is agricultural, economic, hierarchical. A lord owns land. A lord governs subjects. A lord commands loyalty. When that term becomes attached to divinity, the divine is reframed as a feudal ruler. The psychological implication is submission. Then take Jesus. The name comes through Greek, Jesus, from Hebrew/Aramaic, Yeshua. By the time it reaches English, it has passed through linguistic filters shaped by Greek metaphysics and Roman imperial theology. Greek thought emphasized categorization, form, logic, systematization. Roman thought emphasized law, order, authority, governance. When spiritual narratives passed through those languages, they were structured within those frameworks. Now contrast this with Netter and Netteru. The people of Kemet did not operate within a feudal divine hierarchy. The term Netter is better understood as a principle of divine force, a function, a living quality embedded in nature. The Netteru were not gods in the European sense. They were expressions of cosmic processes, aspects of reality, forces like transformation, wisdom, fertility, order, chaos, rhythm, balance. They were not external monarchs ruling from above. They were principles operating within existence. To translate Netteru as gods or goddesses is not a harmless simplification. It is a distortion. Because once you use God, you import Germanic Christian metaphysics. You import hierarchy. You import obedience. You import the idea of a being separate from creation. Kemet did not frame divinity as separate from nature. Divinity was immanent, embedded, expressed through metaphor, art, symbol, story. Kemet was metaphorically inclined, artistically structured. Their cosmology was poetic and symbolic because they understood that language gestures toward reality but does not capture it. The Greeks, and later Europeans, were more systematizing, classification-driven, and control-oriented. They translated symbolic cosmology into categorical theology. Fluid principles became anthropomorphic deities. Living forces became characters in a pantheon, and once categorized, they could be compared, ranked, and eventually subordinated to a singular God. That is not translation. That is cosmological replacement. Even Egypt is Greek, Aegyptos. The land called itself Kemet. Once renamed, It entered European narrative space, and from there comes Egyptology, the study of Kemet, filtered through Greek and later European academic frameworks. Notice how subtle this is. Rename the land. Rename the script as hieroglyphs, from Greek hieros, sacred, and glyphian, to carve, instead of meduneter, words of divine force. Rename the divine principles as gods, and within 2 generations, the worldview shifts. The teaching of Ren and Kemet emphasized that the name carries essence. To alter the name is to alter the perceived function. If you rename a cosmic principle using a feudal term, you unconsciously shift how people relate to it. If Neter becomes God, relationship shifts from alignment to submission. If Neteru become gods, metaphor becomes mythology in the dismissive Western sense. This pattern was not limited to Kemet. Across the Americas, indigenous cosmologies were labeled myth, spiritual leaders labeled witch doctors, sacred sciences labeled superstition. The Latin word paganus became pagan. Heathen marked the spiritually outside. Tribe reduced nations. Each word framed indigenous systems as primitive against a European theological and political standard. Conquest of land was accompanied by conquest of vocabulary.
And once vocabulary shifts, agreement shifts. Once agreement shifts, memory shifts. Etymology exposes this. It asks, who coined the term? Under what empire? What worldview does it assume? What original word did it replace? What psychological posture does it encourage? Submission, hierarchy, separation, or alignment, participation, integration. When you translate Neter as God, you collapse 2 fundamentally different cosmologies into one category. One is feudal, centralized, command-based. The other is symbolic, functional, nature-embedded. One places divinity above and outside. The other expresses divinity through and within. They are not interchangeable. So studying etymology is not rebellion for its own sake. It is cognitive clarity. It is understanding that language is architecture. Change the architecture, and you change how people think inside it. If Ren carries function, then reclaiming original terms is reclaiming functional perception. Because when you define your cosmology with the vocabulary of a conquering system, you unknowingly adopt its metaphysics. Land can be occupied. Wealth can be extracted. But when words are replaced, reality itself can be reorganized. So the discipline is simple and precise. Trace the root, examine the agreement, and choose consciously which words you allow to define your divine. Ashe.